So, my dear friends, the first film I'd like to focus on today is the first film that can be found on one of the Blu ray discs, and it is a work which is described as being from the year 1956. And it stars Pascal Lamorisse, and it is written and directed by Albert Lamorisse. And the name of the work is, and please, once again, please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the French language. I hope you can forgive me. It is Le Ballon Rouge, or as it's known in English, The Red Balloon. So the Red Balloon is coming back to the Criterion Collection or Janus Films DVD or home media releases. As I mentioned before, we did see a number of previous releases of the Red Balloon, such as these Janus Films related DVDs, which I have in my hand. But now, on the occasion of this wonderful Blu-ray set, courtesy of the Criterion Collection and purported to be based on new 4K digital restorations, we have our 2K digital restorations or 4K digital restorations. In the case of the Red Balloon, a 4K digital restoration. We have a lovely presentation of a lovely set of films. And The Red Balloon certainly falls under that category of loveliness and charm and exquisite nature that is poetic and humble and filled with life and energy, and also a great sense of a universality that I think makes for a wonderful ease of entry and a type of accessibility that is also relying on the power of cinema language that is very enchanting from start to finish. The Red Balloon, if we were to try to describe the plot or story structure, is one about a young boy living in Paris. We understand it's the 1950s, so contemporary to the times of the film's making. And immediately, or almost immediately, we understand that there is a red balloon, vibrant and alive and lively, with a string, and it seems to be with a life of its own, that is hopping along or flying along on its own will, on its own volition, and immediately striking up this friendship, very strong bond between this young boy and the balloon. Thus, seeing that when the young boy goes out onto the streets going to school, walking from home to school, for instance, and we go out into the open, busy streets of this cosmopolitan Paris, and the young boy, the balloon follows, and it's the vibrant red nature set against the backdrop of the cosmopolitan environment, and this seemingly, at first glance, perhaps fantastic fantasy nature of this relationship, I think, also gives way to a sense of the day-to-day combined with the utterly sublime and lyrical. I mean, after all, there is, I think it's to see a balloon and to see a young boy within the same cinema space, I think it's a fairly, I think, it's an image that I think is reasonably, it's one that it can be conjured up fairly often. But to have this idea of a life and a friendship and a bond between the boy and the balloon, such that the balloon can be said to be flying along on its own will, following the boy as the boy goes to school, or following the boy as the boy is encountering some other school kids, and maybe the stakes are raised ever so gradually as the film progresses, especially when we see that the boy and the balloon's bond, the friendship, might be under a certain degree of pressure or even threat from other school children along the way, but never losing sight of the fact that there is a loveliness and charm and sweet innocence that is being portrayed here. It makes for, I think, utterly compelling viewing that is also relying on cinema language to give life to this friendship or bond. I mean, it's the balloon as a character is given life through it could be said cinema magic. I mean, there is a way that the balloon travels from one part of the screen to the other part of the screen. And there is maybe a special effect, or perhaps there is a type of magic, or there is maybe a life that is being portrayed right there. And so that's one way of me trying to say that cinema language and technique and style in the hands of Albert Lamouris, I think, is done so well as to rely on or use or showcase the practical, reliance on practical effects and props, and also the delicate nature of simplicity of shots. I mean, there is nothing that is overtly, say, flourishy, or there's no grandiose gesture of sweeping camera movement or a type of over the top type of showcasing of cinema style. Everything is very direct. Everything has a direct accessibility, but that also allows for room for, say, the application of the special effects or the props to again come to life based upon the application of the cinema language of Albert Lamouris. So in many ways, this can also be showcased to be a true tour de force of style and substance that has the feeling of a type of simplicity and accessibility on the one hand, but when one realizes or one is reminded of just what is going on here, in many ways giving life to something that is otherwise inanimate. That is a very powerful and quite inspirational thing indeed. When I say giving life to the inanimate, I do want to emphasize a couple things here. It is. It's not. I mean, I think one way to describe it, or perhaps describe the actual bond between the young boy and the balloon, or to be more specific, the activities and the life and soul of the balloon, the red balloon. One could suggest that the balloon itself is gaining or maybe adopting certain human characteristics, the type of anthropomorphic presentation of the balloon character, or maybe personification of the balloon character. But we have to be reminded too that the actual showing of the balloon character is such that we see the balloon, and we see the balloon as a balloon with the string and flying along in the within the whimsy of, say, the breeze of the streets of Paris in the 1950s, etc. But it does fly along, and it does go to places that we think that it wants to go, or we acknowledge, or we understand, or we intuit that it wants to go. So on the one hand, it does have a life, but on the other hand, it is still acknowledged to be a balloon. And we don't have necessarily moments of it talking per se, or there isn't any type of appearance or semblance of any human characteristics, physically speaking. The balloon is the balloon. But so therefore, it's giving life to the inanimate while still maintaining the characteristics of that object itself. So rather than rely on applying human traits or personification traits, it is very much acknowledging the inanimateness of the thing itself while giving life to it, which I think is a really lovely, charming quality. It makes for, I think, the top-notch level of craft that is involved in giving life to this object, this balloon, the red balloon, in terms of the Albert Lamouris cinema technique on the one hand. But also what it does is it I think, maybe either directly or maybe subtly or subconsciously, it does remind one of when one is young and one plays with toys. There is this way of using one's imagination to give life to the toy that one is playing with. And there's a type of magical quality that happens. I don't know how, but for me, I remember when I played with toys as a young boy, I imagine the toy having a life of its own, in a manner of speaking. And so to play with the toys, or playing with other toys, or playing with other children with those toys, and imagining them having life, I mean, that was there was a magical quality to that. And I think when I watch this film, every time I watch this film, I'm reminded of that magical quality of using my imagination when I was a child, way back when. And so those days perhaps are long gone, or long behind me. As I have grown much older and have advanced well into my adulthood years, so those days might be far behind me. But what I can say is that I am very pleasantly reminded of those childhood memories when I revisit this film, because it does jog the memory, but it doesn't just jog the memory for me. It makes it come to life in a way that is very direct and intimate to my own position as a spectator of this work. So those distant memories, while I acknowledge are distant in my own say scope of the years of my life, they still feel very, very close to home every time I watch this film. So there is another magical quality that is operating here every time I watch this film, Albert Lamouris's The Red Balloon. I love this film. I think it's magical, tender, clever, and it has turns that are thrilling. There's suspense involved. There's some particular moments that are very, almost hair-raisingly thrilling, and you're almost like nail-biting suspense as well at some moments. And it has a lovely bond. And this is, I think, due to the craft that is involved with the life of the balloon in the hands of Albert Lamouris and company, and also the great performance, the innocent quality of Pascal Lamouris and this young boy, the son of Albert Lamouris. And so there is also, I think, a great showcase. Pascal Lamouris, the performance is part of the film, it's part of the world, but there's also almost a documentary quality. Pascal Lamouris is being Pascal. It's not necessarily an adopted performance of a new, different character per se. It feels like it's almost like the camera is following this young boy on the streets in a type of almost quasi-documentary feel, which I do want to emphasize, because one of the things that I think is true about Albert Lamouris' style in this and maybe other films in particular is that there is a mix of seeing the actuality of the reality. Namely, family members are involved, so it becomes like family portraits. Actual uses of camera and footage is done in a way that is very much like a documentary feel and style, while also combined with very magical and poetic and lyrical and fiction qualities of film narrative. So this film, The Red Balloon, I'm not suggesting it's a documentary film necessarily, but there are moments or there are components which I think can be acknowledged to be very much personal and biographical, and very much a family affair when it comes to the life and times of Albert Lamouris, including seeing a type of a picture, a moment in time of Pascal Lamouris, his young son, during the 1950s when this film was made. So in that way, too, it's like a family photo album, as well as a lovely fantasy narrative work, which is directed by Albert Lamouris, and it is called The Red Balloon.